Currently, Trump is talking about something called freedom cities, the creation of new cities on federal land.
Almost 1/3 of the landmass of the United States is owned by the federal government, with just a very, very small portion of that land, just a fraction, 1/2 of 1%. Would you believe that? We should hold a contest to charter up to 10 new cities and award them to the best proposals for development. These freedom cities will reopen the frontier, reignite American imagination.
I wonder where he got that idea. This is where J.D. Vance comes in. J.D. Vance is seen as a mild-mannered, well-spoken success story. A populist who was born into tough circumstances in Appalachia, but managed to pull himself up by his bootstraps, graduate from Yale Law, become a best-selling author, become a tech venture capitalist, only to give all of that up for public service. When he was officially tapped on the shoulder for the vice presidential nomination, many of his former colleagues celebrated. Elon Musk, David Sachs, Mark Andreessen, and Balaji all tweeted their congratulations. After all, it was a strange choice for Donald Trump, especially compared to Mike Pence. But when it comes to J.D. Vance, a lot of people make strange choices. Peter Thiel invested $15 million in his campaign to become senator, the largest single donation to a Senate campaign in history. J.D. Vance is an extension of Peter Thiel. That doesn't mean that he is beholden to him, but it does mean that Peter Thiel has had such a huge influence on J.D. Vance's life that you cannot understand him without first understanding who Peter Thiel is.
I'm Peter Thiel. I build companies and I support people who are building new things.
I would say Peter Thiel is the most honest representation of what Silicon Valley is today. Worth up to $9 billion, extremely well connected. He started off as a member of the PayPal mafia, the guys who invented PayPal, and they originally intended for that to be a libertarian alternative to the US dollar. But when it wasn't that and they sold out, he used the money that he made from PayPal to invest in other companies, including being the first outside investor in Facebook. And today he has invested in a huge portion of the tech industry, including companies like Sam Altman's OpenAI. He's also a big deal in the tech defense sector. He owns Palantir, which is a surveillance software that is basically omnipresent in the US government. It's used by the CIA, FBI, ICE, Homeland Security, various police forces. Palantir is also used by private companies such as Cambridge Analytica. In 2009, Thiel wrote a manifesto called The Education of a Libertarian. In this manifesto, he disavows electoral politics and democracy because he doesn't trust the people with big decisions, and he's come to believe that democracy and freedom are inherently incompatible. Over time, he has talked extensively about finding areas where great men can make choices as they see fit, unbridled by the law. Thiel gave the Trump campaign $1.25 million.
What Trump represents isn't crazy, and it's not going away. He points toward a new Republican Party. He points even beyond the remaking of one party to a new American politics.
And in return, he got an office in the Trump Tower where he had the president's ear and suggested candidates for his administration. Some of his selections didn't make the cut, like Balaji, but some did. Michael Kratsios was put in as the Chief Technology Officer of the United States of America, a position I did not know existed, and Michael Anton was put on the National Security Council. Michael Anton wrote a very concerning essay called The Flight 93 Election, which I have linked below, and it is very enlightening about who Peter Thiel thinks belongs on the National Security Council. And remember Curtis Yarvin, who we were talking about before? He is often referred to as Thiel's in-house philosopher. Thiel has not only invested in a number of Yarvin's businesses, but he keeps Yarvin in his inner circle. Yarvin watched the 2016 election from Peter Thiel's house, where they celebrated with champagne at Thiel's successful investment in the Trump campaign. And while Peter Thiel may not be as explicit in his beliefs as someone like Balaji or Elon or even Mark Andreessen, Yarvin assured Milo Yiannopoulos over email that Peter Thiel was fully enlightened, just plays it very carefully. People in the New Right circles refer to Yarvin as Lord Yarvin or the Prophet. This isn't someone on the fringe of the movement. This is someone who is respected. Just like Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance is an avid reader and friend of Curtis Yarvin.
There's this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who's written about some of these things.
Vance not only name checks Curtis Yarvin, but he often uses his languages and repeats his ideas.
You actually popularized the term red pill in the political context, is that right?
Yeah, that's actually true.
Is this concept of red pilling.
Yarvin writes a lot of strange things, but one thing I'm particularly interested in is the blueprint he wrote for Donald Trump. It's called The Butterfly Revolution. It's quite radical and another thing that would be easy to dismiss, but here's a clip of Yarvin talking about why he thinks it would be successful today.
Americans of 2024 are incredibly frivolous, incredibly ironic. It is the most ironic society in history. I imagine people trying to cope with a film like The Matrix or Inception in like 1960. Total frame breaking of this kind in some ways is actually easier than the sort of incremental political logic that people have employed in the past. They can sort of more easily imagine, oh man, it's all the Truman Show. In fact, they mostly already believe that it's all the Truman Show. They just don't understand the implications of that.
Something I find concerning is the many ways that the Butterfly Revolution perfectly aligns with Project 2025. Not a huge amount of the tech bros in Silicon Valley are religious, but that doesn't really stop these kinds of groups working together. Definitionally, both of these movements are fascistic. Fascism has never been a fully coherent ideology. That's one of the things that gives fascism its strength, its ability to bring together groups from different movements, all of whom see fascism as a viable mechanism to achieving their own program. And that's why some people say that fascism is always hyphenated. So it's always going to be tech fascism and Christian fascism, but these people can work together, and they do.
One of the things that evangelicals and libertarians should agree on is that the political order is not divinely ordained.
Amen.
Project 2025 has similar stated goals to the tech industry. In particular, the dismantling of the administrative state and the return of self-governance to the people. Project 2025 is made up of 4 pillars, and Pillar 4 is the playbook. It is a transition plan for the president's eyes only. It will be rolled out upon the president's utterance of "So help me God." We don't know what's in this playbook, but given the alignment of talking points, key figures being involved in both, it wouldn't surprise me if it was similar to the Butterfly Revolution. And I think that's worth investigating. The Butterfly Revolution. Step 1. Campaign on autocracy.
He says, "You're not going to be a dictator, are you?" I said, no, other than day one.
Yarvin says that Donald Trump should run on his autocratic ambition, but he should frame it as destroying an inefficient and unworkable system.
We are in the late Republican period. If we're going to push back against it, we have to get pretty wild and pretty far out there and go in directions that a lot of conservatives right now are uncomfortable with.
We are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
Step 2. Purge the bureaucracy. Curtis Yarvin refers to this as RAGE.
RAGE stands for retire all government employees.
And he has clearly influenced some very important people.
I think that what Trump should do, like if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state.
And we know that Donald Trump would be open to RAGE because it sounds a lot like Schedule F, an executive order issued by Donald Trump in October of 2020. Schedule F would have essentially stripped protections from civil servants who didn't show enough loyalty to the president of the day, which is why Joe Biden rescinded this order the second he came into office in January of 2021, but Trump has said he plans to reinstate it.
First, I will immediately reissue my 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to remove rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively.
But how could you accomplish that so quickly? I mean, you need civil servants. Don't worry, Project 2025 is already on it. Pillar 2 of Project 2025 could be considered MAGA LinkedIn. This platform is designed to pre-stream candidates for their loyalty and streamline the appointments process.
We talk about conservative warriors, but we want people who've been canceled, who've kind of, figuratively given blood for the movement.
You can join it right now. Then pair that with Pillar 3, which is an online education platform known as the Presidential Administration Academy, and you have preemptively educated all future employees on what is expected of them from the conservative administration. Step 3. ignore the courts. According to Yavin, the president should simply state that he believes Madison v. Marbury was decided incorrectly, declare a state of emergency, and that way Supreme Court rulings would be merely advisory.
When the courts stop you, stand before the country like Andrew Jackson did and say the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it.
But thanks to recent Supreme Court decisions, he may not even need to do that.
The High Court has just issued one of its most consequential rulings in recent decades, a decision that not only affects the 2024 race for president following last week's contentious debate, but also the future of the presidency itself.
Trump v. United States has laid the groundwork to ensure that Donald Trump can ignore the court. Now, the president has absolute immunity for core official acts and presumptive immunity for all other official acts, a distinction that has not been clarified by the court, with only a few examples being provided and absolutely no guardrails to stop the misuse of this decision being put in place.
Today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do, because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. The only limits will be self-imposed by the president alone.
Step 4. Co-opt Congress. Yavin suggests that Trump handpick candidates for every single seat, with the sole criterion being personal loyalty to him. Because you can't have a parliamentary dictatorship if you don't have Congress. And while it seems like a big task, Yavin assures us you only need a couple of $1 billion. I know some people with a few $1 billion. While Peter Thiel may have decided to sit this election cycle out, Elon Musk, Mark Andreessen, Brian Armstrong have not.
We got to get the congressmen elected and we got to get the senators elected, because we can take the Senate pretty easily. And I think with our little secret, we're going to do really well with the House, right? Our little secret is having a big impact. He and I have a secret. We'll tell you what it is when the race is over.
Step 5. Centralized police and government powers. In this declared state of emergency, Yavin suggests that Trump take direct control over all law enforcement agencies, federalize the National Guard, and effectively create a national police force that absorbs local bodies.
I think that actually the support of the Democratic public is a cipher. I think that actually all you need is command of the police.
This is so that a centralized police state can be created to back the power grab, and I'd say there's no way this could happen if Donald Trump hadn't tried to do it before. We know that he sent the National Guard during the George Floyd protests.
And then I was insistent on having the National Guard go in and do their work. It was like a miracle. It just, everything stopped.
And we know that he wanted to invoke the Insurrection Act.
If your state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them.
Now, there are, of course, protections within the law, posse comitatus, to stop a president from doing this, but Donald Trump has found a loophole before. I'm sure he'll find one again, especially in a state of emergency where he has absolute immunity for core official acts. Step 6. Shut down elite media and academic institutions. Yavin has explicitly said that you cannot have a New York Times or a Harvard past April. He has a popular theory that true power in America is held by something he calls the cathedral, a term that should alert you, whenever you hear it, to this kind of thing. The cathedral is made up of elite media and academic institutions that, according to Yavin, set the bounds of acceptable political discourse and distort reality to conform with their ideological beliefs.
So the cathedral is essentially performing the functions that a ministry of truth would perform in a classic Orwellian, environment, and it's performing the functions that a religion would in a classic theocracy.
Therefore, existing media and academic institutions need to be dismantled. Vance has been quite vocal about his disdain for academic institutions, despite graduating from Yale, and often repeats Yavin's ideas in his own words.
So much of what we want to do in this movement in this country, I think, are fundamentally dependent on going through a set of very hostile institutions, specifically the universities, which control the knowledge in our society, which control what we call truth and what we call falsity, that provides research that gives credibility to some of the most ridiculous ideas that exist in our country, And so I think if any of us want to do the things that we want to do for our country and for the people who live in it, we have to honestly and aggressively attack the universities in this country.
Trump has said that if elected, he will reclaim the universities from the Marxist maniacs and lunatics who currently control them. How will he do this?
When I return to the White House, I will fire the radical left accreditors that have allowed our colleges to become dominated by Marxist maniacs and lunatics. We will then accept applications for new accreditors who will impose real standards on colleges.
In his Agenda 47, Trump has proposed a law to monitor universities for civil rights violations.
I will advance a measure to have them fined up to the entire amount of their endowment.
That means he could essentially put an institution like Harvard out of business overnight. Elon Musk spends a significant portion of his time trying to undermine existing media in favor of his own platform X. Trump has absolutely no problem getting rid of legacy media. He has repeatedly talked about the government's licensing of broadcast airwaves and about 15 times threatened to revoke licenses of existing stations.
And it's frankly disgusting the way the press is able to write whatever they want to write. And people should look into it.
Step 7, turn out your people. Get your people out in the street to show their support for you anytime a government agency tries to obstruct you. Yavin says this should be like the post-Soviet revolutions. It should be masses of people. It should be joyful. And we know that Donald Trump has no problem in asking people to physically show their support for him.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength.
Once this butterfly revolution has taken place and the presidency looks more like a CEO or a king, the court of tech geniuses will have a much more realistic shot at getting what they want. One thing I can tell you about these Silicon Valley tech bros is that they are long-term thinkers.
Wow, he really just went out and said it. Jeff Bezos, a plutocrat, the second richest man on earth, the guy who runs Amazon, also runs the Washington Post, one of the most influential newspapers in the United States, arguably in the entire world. And yesterday, he made an announcement which confirmed all of the things that many of us have long said. Just like Donald Trump at the moment is taking away all of the pretenses about US imperialism. Truly, we live in the age of they're saying the quiet part out loud. And what he said underlines why we don't live in a real democracy and never have, no matter what we've been told. In a tweet yesterday, Bezos said he'd shared a note with the Washington Post team, as he calls them, about a change coming to our opinion pages. In his words, this is what he says. We are going to be writing every day in support and defense of two pillars, personal liberties and free markets. We'll cover other topics too, of course, but viewpoints opposing those pillars will be left to be published by others. He goes on to say, there was a time when a newspaper, especially one that was a local monopoly, might have seen it as a service to bring to the reader's doorstep every morning a broad-based opinion section that sought to cover all views. Today, the internet does that job. What's extremely funny, to be honest, is what he says next. I am of America and for America and proud to be so. Our country did not get here by being typical. And a big part of America's success has been freedom in the economic realm and everywhere else. Freedom is ethical. It minimizes coercion. And practical, it drives creativity, invention, prosperity.
The CEO of Affinity Partners and former senior advisor to the White House, Jared Kushner.
That's Jared Kushner, the husband of Trump's daughter, Ivanka. He served as a senior advisor in the first Trump administration and was everywhere. And by all accounts, he had a lot of influence on his father-in-law. But he's known for one thing above all else.
It seemed as if from the get-go that Jared Kushner was charged with cultivating the relationship with the Saudis.
Virginia Cantor is Chief Ethics Counsel at Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington.
It appears to be that at the end of the administration, the payoff was a $2 billion investment in this investment fund.
Just months after leaving the White House in 2021, Kushner's newly minted investment group, Affinity Partners, secured a $2 billion commitment from the Saudi Public Investment Fund, or PIF. The news raised a lot of eyebrows.
Some next-level sleaze and grift going on right in front of our eyes.
This is just putting a price tag on American foreign policy.
I've been in this business 40 years. This is extraordinary, unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it.
The reason it was so egregious, he had no experience in that field.
The panel responsible for screening potential PIF investments reportedly voiced serious concerns about Kushner's lack of experience. But the board was overridden by MBS, the de facto leader of Saudi Arabia. That news raised even more eyebrows.
Isn't that a nice story of friendship? Things you do for your bros?
MBS proved to be a close ally to Kushner in the first Trump administration, working closely with him on various Middle East diplomatic negotiations. They worked so closely, in fact, that MBS reportedly told others he had Kushner in his pocket.
It appears to be a payoff based on Mr. Kushner's dealings with the Saudi government and particularly MBS during the Trump administration.
A Senate investigation found that Kushner's fund raked in $157 million in management fees, all while generating no return on investment for his clients. Jared, of course, sees no problems with the $2 billion transaction.
For my critics, what I say is point to a single decision we made that wasn't in the interests of America.
Okay, I'll point to one. How about letting an ally kill a Washington Post columnist, Jared?
What was really troubling about the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi, there was every indication that it was carried out by the Saudis. Basically, Kushner and President Trump gave MBS a pass by virtue of not, calling them out.
Why are you siding with the Saudis over your own intelligence? Because it's America first for me.
That definitely set the tone for how they were going to deal with human rights violations by the Saudis. And it wasn't just that, there were other incidents.
And the list is a long one. There is the use of his second presidential veto,
a resolution putting an end to the U.S. military involvement in Yemen,
allowing continued U.S. support to the Saudi-backed war in Yemen. There's his abandonment of the Iran nuclear deal.
The United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
Saudi Arabia views Iran as one of its biggest enemies and, was very much adverse to the Obama negotiated Iran nuclear deal. And, that was disrupted as part of the Trump administration.
There's the $110 billion Kushner negotiated arms deal between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia.
There was a blockade involving Qatar.
The president today siding with the Saudis. The crisis critical to the U.S. Qatar, home to a key U.S. base with 8,000 U.S. service members.
And so this unprecedented closeness is being interpreted in a new light since the 2021 investment from the Saudis to the one person who always has Trump's ear.
Is it both a reward for how Kushner guided the Trump administration's foreign policy regarding Saudi Arabia in the past administration? And does it look like a payoff for how he can influence President-elect Trump in his future dealings with the Saudi Arabia?
You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed, it'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time.